Good evening. Welcome to this Zoom webinar forum with candidates for Bremerton City Council District 3, which is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Kitsap County. My name is Linda Streissguth, and I will be the moderator for tonight's event. The League of Women Voters is proud to be a nonpartisan organization, neither supporting or opposing candidates and political parties. The League envisions a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. Our questions this evening have been submitted to the League by voters throughout or through our website. We've consolidated those, plus others the public has contributed into the questions I'll ask of tonight's candidates. The questions will cover a range of topics and issues pertinent to the City of Bremerton. Candidates for Bremerton City Council District 3 include Melissa Watkinson, Craig Houston, John Johanson, Johannes Schonberg, Jeff Campbell, Jeff Coughlin, and Jim McDonald. Thank you to our candidates for stepping up to offer your skills and talents in service to our city. You deserve our respect, and we also ask that you maintain civility with each other during this forum. We have 5 of our candidates with us this evening, and we will begin closing statements in the order that candidates appear on the ballot. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to make an opening statement, followed by our questions in rotating order. Each will have 60 seconds to respond. If you've answered a question and have time remaining, you may speak about a previous question or clarify a statement that you've made previously. At the end of the forum, each candidate will again have 90 seconds to make a closing statement. If you run out of time, you can finish your sentence, and our timekeeper will maintain the clock that you all saw during our test section. It's now time to begin our opening statements. And again, that's 90 seconds each, please. And we'll begin with Ms. Watkinson.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Watkinson, and I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation and also descend from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I have family who are enrolled with the Upper Skagit tribe and have considered the Salish Sea my home, as I have spent most of my life exploring the waters of Puget Sound. Community and civic engagement have always been a core part of who I am, and I'm excited to hear from you and represent your needs and interests as I take this next step as an opportunity to run for Bremerton City Council District 3. I'm a trained social scientist and policy professional and have been with University of Washington for over a decade. I use data to communicate and inform policy of the environmental resilience and challenges for coastal and tribal communities. My strengths and values are rooted in building partnerships and leading with equity. The issues that affect our communities today deserve a more equitable vision of tomorrow. I envision a Bremerton that centers equity in its policies and programs and leadership who strategically plans for a sustainable and prosperous future. This future will require leadership that is representative of our diverse neighbors and communities and that is committed to co-develop solutions for our greatest challenges. I'm running for Bremerton City Council District 3 because I believe I am uniquely qualified to bring stronger representation and strategic collaboration to the city's leadership. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Schoenberg.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Johannes Schoenberg. I was born and raised between Seattle, Port Richard, and Mason County, so definitely have grown up in this area and passionate about improving the community and the region that we live in. I was enlisted in the Navy and commissioned through the Naval Academy and have deployed around the globe with sailors, doing everything from humanitarian assistance to protecting merchant traffic around the world. So have a global perspective, came back, worked with Congressman Kilmer for a year as a fellow, learning on how to engage our community, how Congress works at the federal level and government works, then worked with at the state level at the Governor's Military Transition Council, working with veterans and military spouses to help them create new startups and create new job opportunities across the state and the region. And now I work for the Navy supporting building stronger businesses here in economic development, workforce development across the state and the county and Olympic Peninsula. So I'm very passionate about communication, collaboration within the districts, jobs, small business, smart infrastructure, emerging technologies, and have a strong working knowledge of how public-private entities work together and have those relationships to bring the bear to help Bremerton achieve success. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Campbell. Oh, you're muted.
Of course, I had to do that. So, had to be the first one. Thank you. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the other candidates for making this happen tonight. It really is a true honor for me to be here tonight. I've been watching League of Women Voters debates and candidate forums since before I could even vote. I remember watching the League of Women Voters when they ran the president, I remember watching the presidential debates when the League of Women Voters ran that, and I really miss having them run those. But that was a big deal for my family, and these are still a big deal to me. Anyway, I decided to run for city council because I was really afraid that nobody was going to talk about the housing crisis that we're facing, the crisis of affordable housing and the rising rents. Over 60% of the residents of Bremerton rent their homes. 60%, and that's growing, and that's going to continue to grow. We deserve a seat at the table. High rents are sucking the life out of our city right now, and I hope we can spend a lot of time this evening talking about that because it's really important and it's affecting a lot of my neighbors and our whole district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coughlin.
All right. Well, thank you also to the League for hosting, for everybody for attending. A little about myself. I grew up as a science nerd. I loved doing research and solving problems, and I ended up getting my PhD in astronomy. That led me to go work for the NASA Kepler mission for close to 10 years. And what I found is I liked the research, but I really loved teamwork. So I went and got a project management certificate from the University of Washington, and I served as director of our science office for a number of years, where I brought together government, private business, and individuals to accomplish big projects. As far as the city goes, I've lived here for close to a decade in Bremerton. I got to work remotely before it was cool, so most of the time I was living and working right here in the district, some from home and some from great local businesses like Spark Commons Co-working down the street. I'm here with my husband, Nick, who works in the shipyard, and our son, Max, who's working on crawling and babbling. For city involvement, I've been attending city council meetings off and on since about 2015, and especially a lot in the past couple of years. In 2019, I was appointed to the Bremerton City Planning Commission, where I've been able to dive into updating our local zoning and codes and ordinances and be able to make recommendations to the city council and know how that process works. I've also volunteered with the Kitsap Historical Society. I was president last year, and this year I'm director of the museum on 4th Street, running the day-to-day operations, a small local nonprofit business, and interacting with the city. So I'm deeply embedded in this community. I have a stake in the future and deeply care, and I want to serve as a city council person to represent all 5,500 people in this district, because I know what we can accomplish with communication and collaboration.
Thank you. And Mr. McDonald.
Hey, thank you. So I grew up in Bremerton, attended local schools, Olympic College, went to the University of Washington, got a business degree. And I just got a history of trying to make Bremerton better, volunteering. I've been a boys basketball coach. I've served on the Kitsap Federal Credit Union for over 10 years, both as a treasurer and president, and those were elected positions as well. I served on a city council when I lived in District 1, so I was elected and was also elected to city council president. I have been a Bremerton Housing Authority Commissioner, And so I just have lots of public experience. I want to see Bremerton continue to grow, and I think we can do better with our streets and sidewalks. I think with my business background and finance experience with the city, that we can allocate more money to our streets and sidewalks. I want to see us expand internet access to our citizens. As taxpayers, we put money into Kitsap PUD, and we don't get a lot back from that. And I think there's good impetus to start bringing high-speed internet to all of us. And I want to see the city get greener. We have a large transportation network. I think it's mostly gas and diesel. We're not generating any of our own power, and there's lots of opportunities to do that. So I'm just excited to get the opportunity to serve again if I get the chance. Thank you.
Well, thank you, candidates. Now we'll begin our questions. And as a reminder, each of you will have 60 seconds to respond. And we will begin with, where's my question number one? Mr. Schoenberg. So candidates, tell me, what are your top priorities or issues you would like to address during your term in office?
Good evening. Yeah, thank you for the question. Great question. So my top priorities for District 3 are communication with the district. It is really important that we have active and proactive outreach to all of the residents across all the communities across our district, and from Evergreen to Burwell down and across to downtown and to Minette. There's a lot of different issues. So having regular structured meetings at times when people can meet at varied times as well, and creating easier access for our constituents to be heard is really important. I think it's really important to focus on economic development and small jobs, taking some of the background of the work that I've done supporting that development and training for small business owners across the state, bringing that here to Bremerton, and smart infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, looking at different types of technology to support bandwidth to our community, and then collaboration together, tackling these problems together to make our city what we want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. Housing. Like I said before, high rents, just incredible housing prices are choking our city right now. When I walk around town, I've walked the whole district now, and I've met a lot of people. And one of the things that keeps coming up over and over again is just the fear in people. We have renters fearful that they're going to have to move. We've got homeowners fearful that their children aren't going to be able to live here. And we've got business owners who are fearful that their next landlord isn't going to be as generous as their current landlord. We need to focus on the rising rental prices in this city. Thank you.
Mr. Coughlin.
Thank you. I made communication the primary focus of my campaign from the get-go, because that's the very first step in tackling the top issues. I've been going door to door and talking with folks and asking them what are their top priorities and issues. What could the city do better for them? And I've been collecting the data. If you go to my website, coughlinforcouncil.com, you can actually see the list of issues I've gathered. And one of the top ones is homelessness. Dealing with that, providing resources to people in need, and enforcing that to make sure Bremerton doesn't become Seattle. Affordable housing, as Mr. Campbell has brought up, is another top issue for residents. We need to provide more housing, more affordable housing, and rental assistance for those who live here so they don't get left behind. And especially downtown and also Minette, parking is a huge issue. It's been talked about for years with not enough action. So I think it's finally time to really tackle that head on and figure out how to develop both Minette and the downtown area to be business friendly, tourism friendly, and embrace that part of our city.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Well, I briefly covered what my top three priorities are, but I'd like to expand on that. Roads and sidewalks. Everybody knows we can do better there, but we actually have been very fortunate, even during the pandemic, to have a very good budget surplus. but we're still not doing roads and sidewalks fast enough. And I think we can put a lot more resources there. And I've looked at the city budget, and I know there's a couple $1 million we can apply towards our roads and sidewalks, and just getting it done faster is what's important. When I've walked some of our streets, they're in such bad repair that they're going to need a complete rebuild. And that's really costly. If you let a street deteriorate that much, it costs a lot more than maintaining it. So it's very vital that we get a maintenance program going that doesn't let our streets and sidewalks get to the point where they have to be replaced. Internet access, I think, is huge. My brother lives out in Timbuktu, has got a high-speed internet from Kitsap Public Utility District. And we don't, a lot of people in Bremerton don't. And we pay our tax dollars to them.
Excuse me, Mr. McDonald, you're out of time.
Thank you.
And Ms. Watkinson.
Yes, thank you. I, from the beginning, have really been concerned with issues on equity and resilience. And what I mean by that is focusing on equitable and affordable housing and accessible public spaces. And affordable housing, as others have already mentioned, has come up as a primary challenge. And one of the things that I know has not succeeded in Bremerton is the work on addressing kind of single policy solutions. And so one of the things that we really should be looking at is expanding our resources and solutions to bring that. I'm also really concerned with wanting to bring resilience to our economy and the environment. And so a focus on sustainability for our environment and working towards a more prosperous local economy.
Thank you very much. Describe your relevant experience that prepares you for this role on City Council. And we'll begin this question with Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. I'm a data guy. I've been a data analyst for my whole life, and I've worked with huge data sets, and I've done policy analysis. So I'm a data nerd. One of the things that's been frustrating for me working with the city is just the lack of information I've been able to get. And it's not just me. I've been hearing it from a lot of people that trying to get more numbers out of the city has been rather difficult. We get top line numbers, but the top line numbers don't really tell us it. We really need numbers to see how are these policies working. For instance, the planning that's gone on for affordable housing obviously hasn't worked. So, but how are we measuring that? How are we measuring the number of people who are actually in need of affordable housing? Can we start there? I went to a business meeting on BIPOC businesses, and they couldn't even tell me how many businesses in the city were owned by BIPOC people. More data, and that is my specialty and my expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coughlin.
Well, thank you. I described how my background in education, I think, is extremely well suited for this role. My training as a scientist allows me to know how to collect data, good data, and make analysis and decisions based on that. My training as a project manager, I have experience with budgets, personnel, accomplishing big projects effectively. And as far as the city goes, I think I'm one of the few candidates actively serving on an actual city committee. So I volunteered, I've worked hard on the planning commission to do research on the city, to give input and work on that. And then I'm tied into a local business in the district as well, with the nonprofit, with the History Museum. So I have experience dealing with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Downtown Business Association, with the city and their policies and communicating with them. And again, just living here and reaching out to the community, attending community events. I'm a part of this community for close to a decade, deeply embedded in it. And so again, I have the skills, the resources, and the abilities to be an effective council person and represent everybody in this district.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Well, I've already done the job, so I do have a bit of experience there. Also have been a Bremerton Housing Authority Commissioner. And, when I was on the council last time, I worked with Andrea Spencer, the Community Development Director, I've worked with their public works director. I worked with their parks director. I served with Mayor Greg Wheeler. He was a council member at the time. So I have a lot of insight into the city and how it works. So I think I've got a ton of experience to take the job again. Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Watkinson.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would start, particularly for the audience here, is that I'm the only woman among 7 candidates in this race. And I think that in itself will help me to lend a different perspective and experience, and perhaps particularly as a gay Indigenous woman, aiming to acknowledge and bring in more representation and voices across the city. I also have been recommended by the Progressive Voters Guide. As they have stated, I've provided the most thoughtful and progressive platform. I have a master's degree in policy studies and a lot of volunteer and professional experience working on policy development and strategic planning for environmental issues, and also have been a co-chair on the City of Seattle's Environmental Justice Committee for 3 years prior to coming to Bremerton. I believe I have the personal and professional strengths that will allow me to do really well in this position.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Schoenberg.
Yes, hi, good evening. So key skills, I've built a lifetime building sort of to where I'm at today. So years as a Navy leader, as a commissioned officer through the Naval Academy with a Master's of Science in Global Leadership, deployed around the globe, gaining a global perspective on what works and what is not working so well in cities around the globe. When I came off active duty, I interned with a year for Congressman Kilmer, working on Veterans Affairs in DC, understanding congressional budgets and acquisition processes. I spent time with Mayor Wheeler's transition team, focused on emerging technologies, new types of technologies the city might benefit the city. I've been part of the Washington State Military Transition Council with the governor, helping provide policy guidance and direction on how to best transition that population to the private sector. I'm on the Kitsap Economic Development Alliance and Entrepreneurship and Innovation Council. And I have the skills to listen, collaborate, create a vision, and drive the change that we want to see here in our community.
Thank you. Our next question, what do you think is the most pressing issue for Minette? And we'll begin this round with Mr. Coughlin.
I think the most pressing issue for Minette, going around and talking to folks there, is making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to support the unique, cool local businesses that are right there in downtown Minette. Some of the housing some of the roads are in need of repair. We could use more connection to the rest of the city. For example, a little shuttle bus that would connect Minette to downtown Bremerton, to the upcoming Charleston district, to the Harrison area, to enable vibrant an economy and support small businesses. Talk to folks around there as well, and it's goes back to basic infrastructure. They want to see the potholes fixed. They want to see it to be a nice place to live. And homelessness is an issue that has affected downtown a lot, but it's starting to affect Minette as well. A lot of people over there are starting to see more people out on the streets, and it's starting to affect them on a daily basis. And so that's an issue that we desperately need to address, to acknowledge, and to find the right resources to tackle. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Minette is one of the city's centers, and I think one of the things we could do with that, besides repairing sidewalks, there's a lot of areas that don't even have sidewalks in Minette, and the streets can be done, but I think we can also expand some parking in Minette, because when we do festivals and things there, there's no place for people to come to. The district center concept is a good one, but it doesn't really allow right now enough height. So I don't think there's enough people right in that district center. And I think we can increase the height of some of those buildings to actually get more people there, which would support the businesses actually even better. And I think that's really a key for Minette, to be able to have some more services there. We don't have a lot of services. We got a coffee shop and a bar and a nice restaurant, but we could use a lot more services in the area. And I think the district center concept is viable, but we need to execute a little better. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Watkinson.
Thank you. I have been really privileged to live in Minette, and I feel like we have a really excellent neighbors and a really wonderful community. I'm actually going to be on the Minette Edible Garden Tour on August 7th if you're going to be around and visiting our gardens. One of the things that I've been hearing, and especially talking with local businesses, is just the support from City Council and the City of Bremerton as a whole to continue to support the vitality of the downtown Minette area. That includes, as others have mentioned, restoring their roads and sidewalks, and also having access to stronger parking, and really bringing that sense of support and community to the businesses. And I also, before time runs out, I wanted to acknowledge the income and housing disparity that exists, particularly in Minette. Home owners have twice the amount of income as renters in Minette, and over 45%, over 45% of renters in Minette pay more than 35% of their income. So I think we should also be looking at that.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenberg.
Yes, good evening again. So most pressing, as I also live in Minette, and as walking on doors and talking to our neighbors, and one of the most pressing issues that I've heard is just basic communications with the city, understanding when will the period construction start. Most people are not aware that there's a city website that shows it's 90% in I guess completion for design, and maybe construction starts. The questions for the small business in downtown is, how's that going to impact my foot traffic? We just recovered from the pandemic. Now I'm concerned about preventing traffic flow to downtown, or at least to the Minette corridor, to be able to bring traffic to my small business. So that engagement, as a former business owner, I used to run a business in Bremerton, and that communication with the city, understanding kind of what impacts and how we're going to work through them is extremely important, as well as safety concerns and public transit to some of Trenton and elsewhere. So those are some of the key issues I've seen.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that majority of people in Minette also rent. And I'm kind of having a problem with this discussion of homeless people as a nuisance or a problem that needs to be solved. These are citizens. They also vote, and they also deserve services because they are citizens. And the other thing I would like to say is that the people you see on the streets, that's the tip of the iceberg, folks. There's a huge growing number of people who are going to be joining them soon if our rents keep rising. I think that Minette should also look at its single-family home zoning and see how that might be contributing to inequities and housing costs. Thank you.
Our next question begins with Mr. McDonald, and it's a little bit long. Bremerton is currently divided among 3 state legislative districts and under consideration for new boundaries, which may place the city within a single district. What are your thoughts on redistricting and its impacts to voters in Bremerton?
Thank you. I would love to see us under one congressional district. I've actually written to the commission that was doing redistricting, and I've actually supported redistricting. I think the fragmentation we have with the current plan does us all a disservice. I could talk to someone in my district, but it doesn't have the same weight as affecting the whole city or our political force if we can't talk to just one person. So I'm really in favor of redistricting and have Bremerton represented by one congressional district of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Watkinson.
Thank you. I want to just acknowledge the historical practices that have happened within redistricting and gerrymandering, and that have often had the largest impact on communities of color. And so I really feel that if and when we're having a conversation about redistricting for any level of government, we should be including communities, and that's all communities in that conversation. And we should be ensuring that we're doing that in a very inclusive and equitable way, so that we have a strong, equitable distribution of people among whichever lines we draw within that district. I think, in terms of having more than one district across Bremerton, I think, again, it might be a case for speaking with community. I think, there's 7 of us. It'd be great if we could even have 2 representatives in our district 3. It's a joke that some of us have had. So I think the more representation we can have for our communities, the better.
Great. Mr. Schoenberg.
Good thing. And just wanted to clarify, you do mean the state legislature, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Yep.
Yes.
So this is definitely a complicated issue. On one hand, there's complexity to having multiple different stakeholders to the state to represent the city. And it's similar to the different parties as well, having kind of half of our district split between different Democrat sort of legislative districts is also has its own challenges. And so we definitely see the bifurcation that can happen. But on the other point, there's a lot of value that actually can come from having more voices at the state legislature. If you can coordinate them, if you can set the vision, bring them together as a team, and collaboratively build the direction that everybody's working together to drive towards. So if you don't do that, then we do end up with the silo, and understanding the perspective of our residents, then it would be potentially better and in our interest to consolidate. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell, your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, I have honestly have not thought a lot about redistricting yet, but I completely agree with what Melissa was saying, that we should include everybody in the conversation when we're talking about that. And I also kind of agree with Mr. Schoenberg about, if you have two representatives representing your area, that probably is a good idea. For me, the big thing is communication and participation of the citizens in their government. And towards that end, what I would like to do an experiment in our district and see if we can move as close to direct democracy as possible. And I would do that through a variety, using all the technology and abilities that we have to connect people and share information and come to collective decisions. Thank you.
And Mr. Coughlin.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've been here, I've been surprised. It never made sense to me why, I, being in downtown Bremerton, was lumped in with people right near Gig Harbor. It seemed to be different communities, different needs that should be addressed by different representatives. So in general, I agree that Bremerton as a whole, as a city, should have its own district of those, all of us in the city belonging together. I would also like to see the data behind that decision. I think we need to avoid gerrymandering. We need to avoid redlining, historical problems that have plagued us and separated people. So we should look into that. And I also agree it's also an interesting issue on the city level. I've talked to a few people going door to door who have had suggestions about the city council districts. We went from 9 to 7, but they're kind of drawn up in an arbitrary way as well. And maybe there's an opportunity to have a few geographical city council people, but also a couple at-large city council people. So we can take awesome candidates like we have here today and make sure that they get on council and represent the city.
Great. Our next question. What role should the city council play in encouraging hard to reach populations to become vaccinated? And this question begins with Ms. Watkinson.
I am a Native woman, and as many of you probably, if you're aware of and listening to the news about COVID, those who had been most affected and who lost most lives were among communities of color, including many Native communities. In fact, one of my graduate friends and mentors, who is a director with the United Indian Health in Seattle was sent a body bag instead of PPE when she requested it as part of the Seattle Indian Health Board. So it's been a huge challenge, and I think now communities of color make up the ones that are most vaccinated, and so I really think that we should be looking at what our strategies have been within these communities and employ them elsewhere.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenberg.
There is definitely a lot of mistrust in all the communities. And so I think it's really about creating opportunities for education, making sure the right information is going out, helping to be the neighbors. And as community leaders, we are often out talking to people on a one-on-one basis, answering questions, creating opportunities and forums for that education to come out. And as Melissa said, there are certainly a lot of different communities that are, unvaccinated at this point, not necessarily just communities of color. So it really needs to be a much more cohesive and effort, I think, particularly for education and helping communities understand the science behind it and letting people make their decision.
Mr. Campbell.
Wow, that's a tough one. I think we should focus on getting vaccines to everybody who wants it and who really needs it and wants it. For those that are refusing to get vaccinated, I'm not sure what to say. I'm a firm believer that people have a right to say what they do with their own bodies, and I'm very strong. Take a very strong position on that. I will say that it does not help when we have a city council member who is still talking about this pandemic as though it was a hoax. I mean, that does not help, and that's ridiculous. Of course, it wasn't a hoax. I don't know what people's reasons are for not wanting to take the vaccine, but if your reason is that it was a big government hoax and it didn't happen, no, it happened. Lots of people died. Please look at that. Thank you.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yeah, I think communication from the city is one of the cheapest and most effective tools that it has at its disposal to help out its citizens. And we should be investing in infrastructure on the communication side to make sure that we are reaching out to everybody in the city, not only for this case, but for just keeping them up to date with other issues in the city. For vaccinations especially, as people have said, some people have mistrust, they might have misinformation. So a coordinated campaign by the city would really help. And you need to use all available methods. You need to look online, you need to go in person, door to door, and you can enlist the help of local leaders who know their community best to be able to help you do that. And so that the city had a volunteer program where local leaders, were on a call list for situations like this, where the city knew who they were and was up to date. It'd be easier to reach out and make sure that everybody got out there and neighbors were knocking on neighbors' doors, just able to encourage them, give them some confidence, making sure they get the right information.
And Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think the city has been too quiet on the subject. I think the city should have been promoting vaccinations. I think the city should have been opening up some of their sites like Sheridan Park, the Bremerton Community Center, even the Norm Dix Government Center. Every neighborhood site that we should have opened up for people to be able to get vaccination, because some of the issue was getting the vaccination, and I think the other issue was information that Jeff had talked about, which I think is really important too. So I think the city could have done better, and I think we could do better by just promoting and opening up sites where vaccines can happen. Thank you.
As we look to recovering from the pandemic, how can City Council help small businesses survive or recover from the impacts? And what are your thoughts about families and students whose education has been disrupted this year? And we'll start with Mr. Schoenberg.
Okay, that's a lot for 60 seconds, but so City Council and small business. So small business, there's been an amazing effort from our local Kitsap Economic Development Alliance, from Kathy Kokas, from our local SBDC Small Business Development Centers, to distribute a large amount of CARES Act funding. I do think there's a lot of education that is still left to be done for small businesses that are looking for grants or support, bridge funding, loans, to be able to help them through the remaining time or invest. I think it's really important that we think about infrastructure, and there's basic things. Just walking and talking to the business owners. Parking is a big issue. Getting footfall, visitors, and the parking to allow their employees and their customers to come visit. We have to solve this quickly, at least in that little area for them. And we can't continue to lose organization or companies like Hot Java and Didi. We have to figure out how to sit with them and get them to stay. So that's the first thing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. Here's where I think some data would really, really help. I spent the last couple of weeks trying to find, so the mayor presented a report where he said, I think it's 1,000 businesses went out of business in the last couple of years during the pandemic, or during the last year. And I was like, that's horrible, right? Who were they? How many of those were owned by BIPOC business owners? What kind of businesses went out of business? Was there something we could have done? But I can't get any information about who went out of business or even the names of the businesses. So I think data, this is the one area where the data can really help us. Yes, thank you.
And Mr. Coughlin.
Thank you. I know one frustration for me working on behalf of a local nonprofit was the distribution of the lodging tax funds. This is tax revenue generated by hotels that go to local businesses and nonprofits. The fiscal year for this 2021 would have normally come out a year ago, and the application basically just came out a month ago. So the delay to that, I think, really hurt a lot of businesses to not know that they were going to get those funds, not know if they were still coming, and there was just some poor communication. So I think what the city can do is better communication to start, getting all the local businesses together, making sure that they have what they need to know how to navigate the state and federal processes. And then going forward for the city council to directly as a line item, not require some things like the Chamber of Commerce, the Downtown Business Association, the Minette Business Association to compete with existing nonprofits and businesses for the same pool of money, to make a line item for those top tier organizations so that they're well funded, they can help coordinate all the local businesses to make sure that they can all not only survive, but thrive.
Mr. McDonald.
So the city could do a couple things. One, making sure all the CARES Act funding is distributed correctly, but the city really ought to launch a Buy Locals campaign, because it's so important to our local businesses, and people don't always realize what an impact of even small purchases make by many of us at our local businesses. I think the B&O tax that we have, we've been raising it, and it's an ordinance I got passed last time I was on the council that keeps lifting the exemption for small businesses. We could look at lifting that even higher right now. The city's been doing really good financially, even during the COVID crisis. So I think that would be another way that we could go make businesses more successful by not taxing them on money they don't even earn. That tax applies to their gross income. And if they lose money, they got to pay that tax. So I would be supporting raising that B&O tax exemption as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Watkinson.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of low-hanging fruit is to actually model buying local. Every material and company that I've used with this campaign, for example, is somebody that's local to Bremerton area. And so I'm proud to be able to support local businesses in that way. I talked to a business owner today who is on 4th Street, and he said that he had saved up for the possibility of the reconstruction on 4th Street, but eventually ended up going through all of his savings due to COVID, and now has no pocket left for that impact that's going to likely have an effect on his business with the reconstruction of 4th Street. So I think that certainly City Council could be doing more to identify strategies that are going to help to strengthen the capital that small businesses will have to rely on and fall back on when things get really tough.
Thank you. What would you do to encourage economic development and employment diversity? And this round will begin with Mr. Campbell.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yes. What would you do to encourage economic development and employment diversity in the city of Bremerton?
Economic development. Okay, well, I would not be giving out tax breaks to fund super expensive condos. That I would definitely not do. In terms of equity, hiring equitably, we're facing a real problem here in the city. We want to diversify the people who work in the city government, but then we still have a goal of only promoting from within. If we only promote from within, we're going to have a white workforce for another 30 years. So that's something we're all going to have to really talk about. And I think it should start with our discussion for the next police chief. Thank you.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yeah, I'll just pick up right there from Mr. Campbell, because I think it's a great point. When I've gone and talked to folks around town, and especially people of color, talk about the police department. BPD in general, compared to other cities, has been great, but there's a severe lack of diversity on the force. And I believe that when it's come up in the past, the excuse has been, oh, we're just not getting any applicants from people of color. And that's really it's an excuse. What we need to be doing is, and if it takes some funds to do it, to actively go out and solicit people to apply to the police department, to the city staff, to get people from the outside. When we get more voices to the table, a diversity of backgrounds and experiences and opinions, we do much better as a city, do much better as a police department, and just better overall. So it's something the city seriously needs to invest in financially if needed. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. So for the economic development piece, one of the things we're doing really well is we've got a great Port of Bremerton working with us right now, and they are on fire as far as job creation. And so I think we need to keep supporting the Port of Bremerton and the expansion out in that area. For employment diversity, we probably just need to go do an internal audit just to see, where the city is with their hiring policies. I don't know where that is. I don't really know what the current diversity is with the city, but I think just taking a look at what that is, it would be really key. And I still think the internet is really important. So getting, the PUD involved with high-speed internet, because that gives opportunities for all of us, even with home-based businesses, to get good paying jobs right from our homes. Thank you.
Ms. Watkinson.
Hi, I think I understood the question a little bit differently, but I will just say I'm the leader of the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts within my professional job. I understood that to be a question about how do we diversify the employment opportunities in Bremerton. And I know that there are some kind of restrictions related to agriculture in particular that we could be reassessing to just determine what are some of the natural resource factors that we can bring in as economic opportunities and development for our city. As Jim mentioned, we have a port that's bringing in a lot of jobs. So I really think that we could also help to provide programs to support the development of our maritime industry. And really all of this for me is centered around the introduction and support of green jobs in our district. And that's going to be something that's going to be affecting all industries, technology, communications, public service, you name it. So I really think that we should be aiming on green jobs for the city of Bremerton.
And Mr. Schoenberg.
There is a lot to say on this. So there are incredible opportunities at the national, state, and local levels to create new economic opportunities in this county and between Column and Pierce County. So one thing in my role at KEDA on the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Committee is we're driving towards applying for a state grant for the county to support a new innovation cluster. There are kind of different aspects of an innovation cluster that are really critical to bringing new capability, new jobs to a region. And we're actually working with a consultancy through the state with Norway that's very specialized in these sorts of opportunities to create new jobs, new small business. It also requires new workforce development opportunities. So working with Olympic College, with Western, with Wazoo, to help them expand their capability of the majors they offer and the infrastructure that they have. So the vision is growing, the vision is there. We need to democratize access to STEAM outreach, bringing in communities of color to be able to be scientists and engineers in this new cluster that's growing.
Thank you. Our next question. What would you do to address the rapidly growing homelessness population in Bremerton? And this round will begin with Mr. Coughlin.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this is a crisis. This is, when I go talk to people, a lot of the top of their minds. I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge it. I'm not seeing a lot from the city council at present to acknowledge that this is a top issue and a crisis. So that's step one. Step two is providing the resources, whether it's on the city, state, federal level, so that people have a place, to go at night, a place for their belongings, a place to get food, a place to go to the bathroom. There's a lot of bathrooms during the pandemic downtown that have been completely locked up. And you're seeing people forced to use the restroom in parking garages. That is horrible to think about for them and affects everyone around here. And so we need those resources that people can get the individualized help that they need to get out of homelessness. And on the other side, we also need enforcement. We can't have people sleeping in the entranceways of our businesses, in people's backyards. I've talked to folks who don't feel safe sitting on their porch anymore, especially close to downtown. So we need to couple the two of those and start to address this crisis, which is only going to worsen, as people have pointed out.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. Well, this is obviously just not a city problem. It's not even just a county problem. It's really more of a regional problem. But I do think there are several things we can do to make the situation better. One, Maria Cantwell was just out talking about increasing federal funding. When I was on the Burmerton Housing Commission board, I saw the need, and a lot of the need is not met because there's just not enough federal funds to help people get into affordable housing. The other thing, though, I think is important is that we need to do a housing first solution. I'm really a big proponent of that. So we get people into housing and then we help address their problems. Right now, if you're a convicted felon, you've got a drug problem, we throw you out of federal housing. And that doesn't really help solve the problem. It just makes the problem worse. So housing first houses people, and then we have someone in the housing area work with those individual problems, whether it's job training, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's mental illness. But I think housing first is really a key element to helping us move away from this housing problem we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Watkinson.
Thank you. As some others have noted, we are going to be continuing to experience so much growth, and so our need to actually address this, we should be addressing it for the now and also for the long term, and also looking at it region-wide. I'm privileged to know another Echo Hawk who is the former executive director with the Chief Seattle Club. And it's an organization that houses and provides community services and support services to the Native homeless community, which happens to be the largest homeless population by population. And I understand that we need to be focused on housing, but we also need to be focused on providing human services, and bringing decency for the people who don't have housing, as Jeff was mentioning. We also need to be identifying safe locations and drop-off sites for those who have hazardous materials or needles. I've heard that there are needles in parks, and so wanting to also address the safety for the community largely.
Thank you. And Mr. Schoenberg.
Growing up here, that homelessness always has been a challenge with the city, and it's something that hits home. There are, a large population of homeless veterans as well, and we, in sort of my previous roles, have worked with some excellent organizations over in King County that have worked to use different variety of housing, from tiny houses to sort of studio, very small apartments that are sort of funded through grants or things like that, to help people get off the streets in order to get into a rehab kind of opportunity, or to get an initial job or things like that. And so I think taking those lessons learned, collaborating, being able to bring those back to Bremerton, and then driving towards solution. We have to bring the stakeholders together. There's an organization called God's Broken Home University, GBHU, in Bremerton. They served 27,000 meals to homeless last year in downtown Bremerton, but the police have been giving a hard time. How do we help them scale? They built trust with those with that population. How do we get them to work with the city to be able to get services better to our residents? Thank you.
Thank you. How do you perceive the relationship of residents in the city?
Excuse me. I don't think I got to answer that.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Getting ahead of myself. And this one, I know you have a response to.
I have a lot to say on this one. Thank you. I live right across the street from the Salvation Army, as you can see. And so when I look out at the people in my neighborhood, I don't see a problem. I see a community. I see a community with needs. Housing is a human right. So the answer is to get people into housing and to get people services. There's also a huge mental health problem down here. We could use a full-time mental health professional or office right here on the corner of ML King and Warren. We can do this. And the other thing is that it's not about moving people into homes. It's about that people will build homes wherever they are. Stop running them off from their homes. That's a good place to start. When they build communities, stop tearing those communities apart and running people off. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do apologize again. So our next question, how do you perceive the relationship of residents in the city with the police department? And do you have suggestions to improve emergency services and community relations with first responder departments? This question will begin with Mr. McDonald.
Boy, that's a tough one. First of all, I think Bremerton's done a pretty good job with community policing, putting police officers out in the high school. I think we could do that a lot more, though. I like the bike patrols when police are out in the neighborhoods. I would like to see them walking about a lot more. What was the second part of that question? Thank you.
Second part of that is, do you have suggestions to improve emergency services and community relations with first responder groups?
So our fire department is our primarily first responder. We contract out with a lot of our ambulance service. So I think that would be the place I'd like to look to, where we don't really have any control over what those people do as first responders. Our fire department, I think, is very well respected. but our ambulance group is almost all contracted out. We turn that all over. So I guess I would like to see us have a little more control over our ambulance people. I think our police are really engaged, trying to be engaged in community issues, and I think they're working on it. I think they'll get better.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Your time is up. Ms. Watkinson?
Yeah, I'll start off by just noting that I really am interested in meeting with more of the people who are part of the Community Neighborhood Watch, learning about what their experiences have been, and also hearing from the community about any interactions that they've had with them. I know that they are good at really ensuring that their neighbors feel safe. And I'm also concerned, when I have my friends who don't look like everyone else who lives around here come house sit while I'm gone, maybe have negative interactions with the community just because that they're not represented either in the neighborhood watch or often within our city. I also want to have more conversations with community about their experiences with police and with the police officers, because I think that we can redistribute some of the funds from the police department to support stronger emergency and family services in our area.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenberg.
Thanks, Sue. So the number one issue or complaint that I've heard so far about the Bremerton Police Force and kind of more broadly the Kitsap Sheriff's Office is really rudeness or demeanor, in particular to some communities of color. So one example is one of our residents, Daryl Riley, told us a story, and we've been about being pulled over, and he was treated, just for a simple pullover. It was an experience that left him very upset, and there was no clear path to resolution. So it's something that we have to be able to, and be clear about, okay, understanding a resident, is able to reach out, and whether it's through the city council or other, an advocate or some sort of voice that's able to reach out to the police department in a fair and meaningful way. In 2019, there was 51 complaints about the Bremerton Police Department, and I think a lot of people, probably aren't communicating or speaking up. So I think it's important that we reach out and pass it. Thank you.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. We absolutely need a more diverse police force in Bremerton. And I'm also very serious about looking at moving some funds out of law enforcement and more into services for the homeless, more services for mental health, more drug treatment programs, whatever. And also I'm interested in looking at alternatives to law enforcement in the community in terms of safety. I've already started an interesting conversation with the Evergreen group about, how can we maybe come together with all the parties involved and really take an alternative approach to solving these problems. Wouldn't it be great if the unsheltered and the home people who own homes and everybody could just get together and talk about their community, because we are all part of this community. So that's what I would like to say about the policing.
And Mr. Coughlin.
Correct. Yeah, as others have mentioned, diversifying the police force, making sure we're actively soliciting a diverse applicant pool is the first step to make sure that the people who police our community look like our community. I would like to see more community liaisons in the police force, maybe dedicated time to go and join neighborhood groups, to join neighborhood meetups, get to know the people in the community a little more, and they get to know the local officers. As Jim mentioned, the bike program, I've heard from a lot of people who want the bike program back, that they're sad it went away, because that was a nice way where they could see officers, let them know of anything going on in the neighborhood, get to know them, and it was an effective way for the officers to be able to, patrol and know the whole neighborhood. And then finally, what the city council can do is we can directly fund extra services, right? We're a growing city, we're getting more people, and we're getting more revenue, and we should spend that revenue on our critical community services. There's been some great approaches by other cities to integrate social workers, mental health counselors with the police, so that when they respond to a call, they can make sure that they're responding in the right way.
Thank you. Our next question, what do you think is the appropriate role for City Council in responding to climate issues? And we'll begin with Ms. Watkinson.
I've had a peek at the climate assessment that had been done a few years back that was focused on the county as a whole, and then there were some specific recommendations for Bremerton, and it addresses many of the impacts and challenges that many communities along our Puget Sound will be experiencing within, or I should say are, and will continue to be experiencing. I think that it is critical that the City Council actually create a climate action plan with interaction and consultation with our constituents to be able to address an equitable distribution of how we're going to implement strategies to limit the impacts to community health, limit the impacts to our environment that we all enjoy and rely on, also provide safe public spaces for communities to recreate and get shade even when it's 110 degrees in Bremerton somehow. Yeah, definitely a priority for the City Council to create a plan on that.
Thank you. Mr. Schoenberg.
Excuse me. So the City Council's role, while kind of small in scope, I think can actually have significant impacts on the residents who live here. As Melissa mentioned, just a simple plan is important. You got to create the vision and to be able to drive the community towards it. I think there's a lot the city can do as it looks in its growth and growth plans, land use, and understanding some of the lessons learned from around the world. In Dubai and the Middle East, they suffer from undue heat, and they adjust their architecture to reflect. So they don't necessarily just steel buildings with windows that are reflecting the sunlight onto concrete. They have different types of materials, different heights. They have different trees and shade covers. So I think, kind of the way that we live and trying to increase our use of public transit, reduce reliance on cars, multimodal transportation. I think that our infrastructure is a really big part of that, and how we design our city will play a part in how much emissions we produce.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Thanks. If we're really serious about the environment and the changes in the environment, then we're going to have to do something about the cars. All I've been hearing, I've been hearing a lot of suggestions about we need more parking, we need to do more roads, we need more. Well, that's all more cars. So that's just doubling down on what the problem that we have already. How many 110 degrees days are going to have to experience before we start saying, oh, maybe we should really come up with some really cutting edge public transportation solutions? How about a tram from here to Silverdale? How about anything? And the other thing is the health aspect. Warren Avenue is just a constant stream of carbon. I mean, it's just a constant highway. Where are all these people going? They're not coming into my neighborhood. I think we should look at our transportation system first if we're really serious about the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coughlin.
So at a planning commission recently, we updated one of the shoreline master plans. And it was a little shocking to me that it was the first time that climate change was acknowledged in it and the impact of sea level rise in the future for planning. So the first thing to do is to acknowledge it and to start talking about it. Communication is always the first step. We could definitely encourage green businesses to come into Bremerton. There is a lot of opportunity outside the city limits to capitalize on the experience and the expertise we have from the shipyard workers to encourage green industries in the area to come to our city. Both big and small, local places like Frog Soap that recycle used cooking oil from local businesses. The city, again, can reinforce and lean into our great local small businesses to make sure that that's encouraged. And finally, it's emergency preparedness, right? There's only so much we can do to slow things down, and we should do everything we can to slow it, but a lot of damage has already been done, and we're going to be having to be dealing with that. We're going to have a lot more hot days ahead. So emergency preparedness, investing in emergency preparedness so people aren't dying in nursing homes is number one as well.
Thank you. And Mr. McDonald?
I'm a big proponent of think globally and act locally, and I think the city can do a much better job of working on its environmental footprint. I don't see a single solar panel on any government building or hardly any houses in Bremerton. We have Kitsap Dam. It's a great resource. We could be generating electricity from that facility. We should be planting more trees to work on our urban forests. We talk about the heat, but one of the things that helps cooling, especially areas that are just all concrete, are trees. We just have so many opportunities. We're still using all gas and diesel for our fleet vehicles. There's just so many opportunities. It's like all low-hanging fruit, and we should start working on those. And I'm surprised that we're so far behind on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. What is your position on the multifamily tax abatement policy in Bremerton? And this first goes to Mr. Schoenberg.
Yes, and specifically to clarify, so the multifamily tax abatement for developers is what you're referring to?
I am going to say yes. This was a question from our audience.
Okay, and actually, so borrowing from Mayor Wheeler's conversation earlier today, so I'm very much in support of the effort to wind down some of the multifamily tax at this point. Development, the demand is quite strong. That was written years ago in a time when there was we were trying to draw developers into our city. At this point, I'd say that it's time to revisit that policy and shorten the amount of time before we see or immediately get immediate return on investment to our community, as opposed to 8 and 12 years for a tax break. And potentially even add a tax to generate new revenue at some point. So very nuanced, complicated kind of conversation and discussion, but we're certainly in a record for permits. The growth of the city is rapid. So I think it's very much time to revisit that policy.
Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. So my understanding of the policy is that if you build a multifamily unit, then you get 8 years of taxes free. And if it's affordable housing, which isn't clear exactly how they're defining that, if it's affordable housing, then they get 12 years free taxes. First of all, I haven't been able to get any data on if anybody has taken the city up on the extra 4 years to make it affordable. So I would have to say that from what I've seen, this program has been a complete failure, and it's cost the city way too much money. We should not be subsidizing $350,000 condos. That's just ridiculous. Thank you.
Mr. Coughlin.
Perfect. Yeah, nothing's black and white. There's always a balanced approach to take. We don't want to be subsidizing luxury condos, but we can't build a wall around the city, just tell everyone to stay out and not build any new housing. One of the most effective ways to lower housing costs is to build new housing. So I think as Johannes stated, this policy did make sense back in 2007 when we needed a kick in the pants to get some development going and some new housing to lower housing costs. But we should definitely revisit it. One of the things I think the city council needs is an unbiased outside assessment. When this last came before the council, the local developer said, yes, we still need this. We wouldn't build a new thing without it. And that could be true, but they're biased to say they want it. So we need the right data. We need the outside experts to weigh in. If we can indeed, with the 12-year exemption, get true affordable housing in the city, then we should keep it. But this is a knob that should be adjusted. And the first step is to make sure that we are continually talking about it on council, not once every 5 or 10 years, but let's bring it up every year, get the data, reassess it, and make sure that we're tuning that knob out, tuning that knob to the right place to balance building new housing, keeping it affordable without, luxury condos.
Mr. McDonald.
Well, I have a different tact. I think there's only been like 3 apartment complexes built with this tax exemption. I'm not sure, but I think it should be expanded because it really doesn't give really great tax exemptions for affordable housing. We could do more. It doesn't do anything for people building 50 or 100 homes on vacant property, that we should be able to have affordable housing there as well. So I'd like to actually offer more incentives to builders to build more affordable housing. I think for the city to just turn us back on this is going to go the wrong direction. We need more affordable housing, and I think the way to do that is through incentives. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Watkinson.
My understanding of what MTFEs can provide is that it's looking at providing some housing options for low-income folks, and it's looking at those who make at or below 80% of the median income in the area, and that a particular percentage of the homes available within a structure are at or below 30% of that income. So I have been talking to different people and getting different kinds of feedback about what MTFE has meant to them and how it's impacted them. And so, I really think, again, as some of my colleagues have said, a reassessment and a review of not only what has not worked and what has worked in the city of Bremerton, but how can we make that program much more effective and equitable across the city. I also think that we should be finding local investors who are invested in our community to be developing new affordable housing. And then again, I know it recently was updated, but take another assessment on ADUs and communicating that option as well within our communities.
Thank you. Well, believe it or not, I have another page, at least another page of questions, but looking at our time clock, I don't think we have time to ask all of the questions that we received from our audience. So I am going to conclude our question portion. And so that means it's time, candidates, for your closing statements. Just a reminder, each of you will have 90 seconds, and we will begin with Mr. Campbell.
Thank you. If we're going to address our affordable housing crisis in a meaningful way, the first thing we're going to have to do is start by reevaluating Bremerton's strategic goals and priorities. Currently, the top goal of our city government is to actively work, quote, I quote, actively work towards achieving neighborhoods that have our homeowner majority. Why is our local government trying to decide who should and who should not live in Bremerton? The thing is, 60% of us rent our homes, and that number is growing. So when you talk about affordable housing, for us, that means stable, manageable rents. So who are we building these $1 million condos for in Minette? Nobody I know. Bremerton should focus on the needs of the people that live here now. If you are a renter, I want to tell you, don't let anybody tell you that you are not an equal part of this community. Don't let anybody tell you that your contributions do not matter. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take all of us staying involved and staying vocal and putting pressure on our elected officials to change the direction of our city. People vote. Land and property don't vote. People vote. So I'm asking you, please vote. Please return your ballot as soon as possible. And then when you've done that, reach out to everybody you know and make sure that they have returned their ballot. Help us send a loud and clear message this year. My name is Jeff Campbell, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Coughlin.
All right, so thanks again to the League for hosting this wonderful debate, for all of my colleagues here for a great discussion, and all of you for tuning in. This is exactly what we need more of. This is local democracy. Government works best when all voices are heard. I've been to a lot of city council meetings where there are votes that affect tens of thousands of people in the city, and you only get maybe 1 or 2 people weighing in, and we need to change that. We need to make sure it's easy for people to give feedback, and that if I'm on the city council, actively solicit that feedback from people. Let them know ahead of time of upcoming votes. I've been going door to door as part of this campaign to community events and businesses, and at this point I've reached the residences of about 20% of registered voters. And I've actually been compiling the data as I showed earlier. Go to coughlinforcouncil.com and you can see what our community's top concerns are. And that's what I'll do as a council person. I have some strong thoughts and opinions on what we can do about addressing homelessness, tackling affordable housing. But really, the primary purpose of a city council person is to find out what you, the constituents' top concerns are and work with the city to address them and meet your needs. I've talked to you, I've had experience on the professional level, on the city level, working with a local nonprofit. But I go back to, I think one of my greatest strengths is as a scientist. I know how to bring in new data and how to change my viewpoints when I get new evidence that shows that there's a different path forward. So that's what I'll do as your city council person, listen to you, work to address your top concerns, bridge that conversation. So please vote Coughlin for council.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you, League of Women Voters. It's been great to be able to talk to everybody tonight. I said this earlier today when I was on the council earlier, one of the things we did was reduce the districts from 9 districts to 7 because we weren't getting enough participation. And so here I'm running against 6 other people. So it serves me right? But, I do have the experience because I've done the job before. I've been a Bremerton Housing Authority Commissioner. I've been a City Council President. I've worked as a volunteer and elected to Kitsap Federal Credit Union for over 10 years, including treasurer and chairman of the board. I've been a boys basketball coach. I'm a Burmerton native, UW graduate, business. I've just got a whole history of experience working and living and loving Bremerton. And I really look forward to serving the council and the community again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Watkinson.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to, again, have an opportunity to connect with our fellow opponents, although over Zoom in this interesting format. We're seeming to be in this transition of returning back to in-person events and still using these cool technologies that we have here. So in my understanding, looking at the data, we actually have about 50% of homeowners and 50% of renters in the District 3. And that's to say that I do think that even homeowners are concerned and wanting to provide availability of affordable housing for communities, as well as concerned for their ability to stay in place in their home. And so that will be another issue that we'll want to be sure to address, is that people can be able to stay in place as they wish. We also don't love the Minette townhomes. That's a lot of what I'm hearing from Minette homeowners as well. So I also see that we have a lot of scientists in this group. So we kind of all utilize a lot of the same side of our brain. I've been fortunate to have a policy training background and to go through leadership training development opportunities to learn how to articulate that science strongly within policy decision-making areas. And I hope to utilize that in this space. So please vote Melissa Watkinson for a sustainable and equitable future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Schoenberg.
Hi, good evening. Likewise, I want to thank everybody and mostly participants as well who've taken the time out of the evening to be engaged, to listen. Our city is what we make it. And knocking on hundreds of doors across our district, what I found is that we have incredible neighbors doing amazing things, from folks you see here to participants, folks that put together the Evergreen Park and patches years ago, working with the City Council to get the grants from the Minette Park, Jennifer Hillclimb. We have an incredible proactive community here. And I think it's really important to have the leadership, the representation in the City Council that is able to listen and to be able to realize people's ambitions and to connect them. If you have a vision over in Minette or over in downtown and you want to know how to do it, how do we connect you with the folks at Evergreen at Minette that have already successfully done that and achieved those grants? How do we empower our neighbors that have a vision to be able to go execute and grow our community and grow the city that they want to live in? So I really want to hear from you. Big part of what I've learned is that access, just talking and having accessible local leadership is absolutely the #1 issue. Reach out to me, info@electschoenberg.com. I respond, I call people back. I've been doing it over the weekends. I really look forward to the election, and I hope to get your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates. And thank you to the 5 of you for joining us this evening. Voters, hopefully this forum has helped you choose a candidate. Ballots for the August 3rd primary election will be mailed out by this coming Friday, July 16th. So they're coming right out. They'll be in your mailbox on Friday. The League is encouraging voters to vote early and return your ballots as soon as possible, preferably to one of the Kitsap County's 23 ballot drop boxes, the locations of which can be found at the Kitsap Auditor's website. With thanks to BCAT, the League's forums conducted this month will be recorded, and links to the videos will soon be on our website at www.lwv-kitsap.org. Please encourage others to view the forums and, most importantly, to vote. Again, my thanks to each of our candidates for participating in our forum this evening. And thank you to each of our audience members for attending, and to those who submitted the many questions we received. Please have a safe and pleasant evening. Good night.
Thanks, Linda. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.